complex in the entire region, not just the communities, but the entire watershed working together to solve these problems. And if you could throw my slide up real quick. I don't know if some of you are familiar with, there we go. Yavapai County, it's a 10 billion plus gross domestic product county. It's the 4th largest county on GDP in the state of Arizona. So we do have financial wherewithal. I don't know if any of you know that. Next slide, please. And what our county's gross domestic product is all revolved around is the real estate market. Every business that revolves around real estate, whether it's home building, development, the services required by residents or the businesses that then develop for what those residents need, those small businesses, then the jobs that are created, that all revolves around the real estate market, whether we want to accept it or not. People want to develop land, they want to sell land, they want to live here. This is a very desirable. I love living here. I come from Wisconsin originally, and I love Arizona, and I love this region. But as does a lot of folks throughout the United States. As other states face hardships, we're going to see influxes in time of more residential water demands, industrial job centers, and so forth. So the only way that, and my optimism is, we're going to have to come together and form what other parts of the United States have done. So there's been other parts of the United States who have dealt with this exact same issue. I'll give you a great example. The Los Angeles Basin, out in California, back in the 50s, it was all agriculture. That was the advent of new high production water wells. And they were pumping the heck out of the groundwater aquifer. It became depleted, their wells were going dry, they couldn't grow crops. And so they said, we have to solve this problem, what are we gonna do? They formed a steering committee that set up a new water authority and created a tax base, various different methods of creating revenues, collecting revenues, and then developing various recycled and renewable water supplies that are now, they are fully sustainably using water in that basin. So it's one of thousands of examples in the United States where entities came together because the challenges were beyond the capabilities of like town of Chino Valley to solve or Prescott to solve. And that's the beauty of that we are at the cusp of that. And just to give you one fact is, the town of Chino Valley recently ran a groundwater model to get what's called a physical availability determination. That determination was for the town's entire water service area. It was determined in that model, you have to show that how much water do you tend to pump every year for 100 years. And when that model was run, as a hydrogeologist, I became very concerned because not only was the upper alluvial aquifer, there's two aquifers in the main part of the Little Chino subbasin, an upper alluvial aquifer and a lower volcanic aquifer. And in many areas, huge areas, both of those aquifers were completely dewatered. So that was concerning to me. You're allowed to do that to get this permit, but what does that say about the timing? This was before 100 years. So if you're a new couple here, that your grandchildren may have lands that they want to live here in the area and they may not be any water for them. So as Gary mentioned, I agree, the time to act is now. We have to come together now, because if we don't, there's a date in the future where it will be too late. We'll have the compression of the aquifer. We won't be able to get the water back in. And I'll just leave it on this note. I'm almost out of time. We don't have Colorado River water here. We don't have access to Salt River Project surface water here, but we get 450,000 acre feet of stormwater here. And we're already managing stormwater from the flood control district based on land damage. We consider stormwater a nuisance right now. We have to flip that and say that's a water supply that's renewable. Why aren't we collecting that with every development that is being developed here off of rooftops and streets, bringing that water to an interceptor from, let's say, Watson Lake out to Chino Valley, treating that water and recharging it in the ground, and further to the north, trying to save the Upper Verde River. So we do have a water supply. We're going to have to change how we think about stormwater. That's our only water supply, so I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much. Chris, water, where are we now?
Where are we now? I'm Chris Kuknio. I'm the supervisor for District 4, and we're an absolutely huge county. I mean, just my district is larger than Vermont. So it puts it into perspective. I basically go from the hospital on Willow Creek Road to the west, all up Iron Springs, Williamson Valley, Chino Valley, Paulden, Seligman, Ash Fork, Paquito Valley, Coyote Springs, and a whole lot of nothing out to the west. But I kind of come at this whole conversation from a different angle. You know, you got Mark, it's his career to do this. You got Gary, it's his life passion to do this. I'm a politician. You guys have given me 4 years to implement whatever I can do to help out this situation. And during the campaign, there was 2 topics that were way at the top that was on you guys' minds. You wanted us to get control of the growth, and you wanted us to get control of water. So we've been working at a lot of things to do that. But in the meantime, I also have to deal with my neighbor has pushed manure against my fence. The roads need repaired. I mean, it's a big spectrum. And I really rely on these guys. I have good conversations with Gary every now and again and go deep in these subjects because they've made it their life passion. But, you know, where are we now? We're at a place where we need to start to act and start implementing things. I've been around here for 47 years, and I've seen things work. I've seen things fail. And I just think there's a lot of stuff we need to start implementing right away. And a lot of it revolves around development. And instead of reacting to development, I think we need to plan for it and our infrastructure. And there's things we can do. I think there needs to be no construction without recharge. If we're going to take the water out of the ground, we ought to be able to put the water back in the ground. And I know that will make building more expensive, but you know, I think we're at that point. When they say 20,000 acre feet negative every year, we're past that point a long time ago. 80% native plants. We've seen these developments go up where they rip every living thing from the ground that knows how to live on what falls from the sky, and then they replace things that require irrigation. And you just look at some of the water companies and their usage, and it tells that story. So in the Granite Oak subdivision, in January, they use just under 2 million gallons a month. In July, they use over 8.5 million gallons a month. So what does that tell you? We're pouring all of our water on the ground. We're using a lot of it for vegetation. So there's some communities where they require 80% native vegetation whenever you do housing or housing developments. And I think we need to implement something like that. We do not use our gray water. And I know in the municipalities, they want to get all that water back for recharge, but when you get in the county, maybe do we require that you have a tank under the ground that collects your gray water? I have one of those, and I use that to water my yard. And you'd be amazed, I tie it in with my stormwater runoff. One storm will fill that tank up, and then you got all this water just stored to use for that. We're partnering with some other groups to use the water that falls from the sky wiser. And this is things that, like as a politician, I can help weigh in on, where at the top of the Big Chino Aquifer, instead of the sheet flow, when rain comes down, it just runs and then it causes floods. They're gonna make that water meander. And when they channel it so it goes like this, it has more time to go into the ground and recharge, and it stops some of the flooding. We're also putting up these small little dams that will catch some of that sheet flow and kind of stop it, hold it up for a little bit, and let it flow in the ground. Metering of wells. I'm not actually for that because I think the government can't help itself. If they meter your well, then they're going to want to tax your well. Then they're going to tell you how much water you can use. But is anybody in here on a well? Okay, how much water do you use every month? And that's the same answer you get from everybody. If you're on a well, as long as it's coming up, you're good. I know I use between 2,500 and 4,000 gallons a month, and I'm on the heavy side with that. But someone on a well has no idea how much water they're using. When in construction, could we require an analog well, something that's not electronic, that doesn't go report to anybody, that just a homeowner can see, to see how much water they're using? Because if you don't have that gauge, how do you know if you have a leak? How do you know if you're using your water wisely? There's no way, because you don't know how much you're using. Stormwater infiltration past the evaporation layer. You know, and just all water past the evaporation layer. So like septic tanks, I'm told that it just goes into this layer where it really doesn't get back to the aquifer. It just gets taken up by the surface or goes up in the air. But Prescott Valley's doing some projects where they drill these rods down that hopefully help the water get past the recharge points to where it actually can keep going down to the aquifer. And I think we should have recharge pipes and retention ponds. We have all these retention ponds that catch stormwater so there's no flooding, but then it sits there and it has to go away by 48 hours. So, I mean, hopefully we can put something in there to get that water moving back into the ground. And I think requiring wastewater treatment with recharge with any planned area development. I was talking with the gentleman earlier out in Talking Rock, Whispering Canyon, and Inscription Canyon. They have wastewater treatment. They're all on sewer, which is good. And then it goes to this wastewater treatment plant, and they take the recharge and they send it to water the golf course. Well, when we do this, why don't we require wastewater treatment with recharge so it goes back down into the aquifer? I think we need to close the loophole on lot splits, and because right now you can, by law, you can split your property up 5 times, and then whoever buys that property can split it up 5 times. And then we start getting these developments that have no flood plan, no water runoff plan, no any requirements from the county, because it's just a lot split like someone's doing something on their own property. And you're supposed to sign an oath that says you can't do that as a developer to make it like bypass PAD requirements, planned area development requirements, but it's happening and we know it's happening. So we need to close the loophole on that. And in that Granite Oaks Water Company, they're struggling, and they have a guy in there on his property, his lot, that uses 100,000 gallons a month. And remember, I said I use between 2,500 and 4. And he says, you know what, stop calling me. I got the money, I'll pay the bill. But you know what, that is like irresponsible water usage on one lot. How do you even use more than I use in a year, you use in 1 month? And I think we need to get together with the Corporation Commission to make it easier to tier the water rates. Prescott had a lot of success with that, where if you use 0 to 1,000 gallons, you pay $1. 1,000 to 5,000, you pay $2 a gallon and it goes up. So when you use that, you have the right to do that, but it's gonna cost you a whole pile of money. And just hitting the pocketbook works with human nature and helps bring down water usage. And I think we gotta stop looking at what everybody else can do, and we gotta start looking at what can I do? You know, how am I gonna change my water usage? And one thing that I brought with me was this little kit that SRP gets out. And if you go to their website, you can order one of these. And I was out at a a council meeting in Chino, and this lady from SRP was talking about what's in there, and it's real simple stuff, but it really just raises awareness. I mean, how many times, or maybe you've done it yourself, where you take a hose and you throw it out by a tree and you turn on the water, and then you forget that the water's running and it just runs water on that ground all night. Well, they got this little device in here that you hook to a hose, and it has a little timer. So you turn it up and it goes for up to 120 minutes, and then it'll shut that water off. So will that save it? It has a little bag that you can put in a tank, your tank, so every time you flush, you save a gallon of water. It has a device where if you have a leak, a drip, people don't realize how much a drip wastes water. And this will show you, if you put it under there and catch that drip, how much you'll be using over a month and over a year in wasted water. And of course, fixing irrigation systems. And I just think we need to look at ourselves and see what are we doing and what can we do better. And as a government, I think it's just time for us to act and start doing things. For so long, I think the Board of Supervisors, the safe thing was to say, well, we have nothing to do with water, it's a state issue. Well, there's absolutely things we can do about water. And in the next part, I'll tell you a little bit about some of the things that we've put into motion right now to get a hold of this situation and move it forward. But, you know, I gotta get this done in 4 years, because you guys might say, Kuknio, you need to just retire. You know, so I have 4 years to get this stuff done. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Chris. Question number 2 for Gary. Solutions we should all be implementing now.
Sure. So look, I've lived here 52 years, and I've seen this town grow. I mean, when I moved here, the restaurants in Prescott closed for lunch. Chino Valley had 400 people in it. Now it's got 13,000. We're gonna grow. So I know how to solve this whole thing, but if I was granted the power to do that, I would probably start a revolution. This isn't, one person's will is not how we solve problems. We're supposed to work together as a community. You know, we all get water from the same source. That's a common bond between us. We need to manage that water with a common vision. The first step to solving this problem is to do regional groundwater management, where everyone works together. And Mark is a great spokesman for that, so I won't go into details. I'll leave that for you to do. I think one of the first things that groundwater management authority, a regional authority, would do would be to do a comprehensive study to evaluate all the potential solutions. We have a lot of ways that we could do this, and I'll go through a little list here in a second. That comprehensive, right now, you know, with the state legislature says you can import water from the Big Chino. They have no analysis or basis to support that that's the best economic solution, that they didn't consider any ecological effects, nothing. They just did it. That's irresponsible management. We need a comprehensive study with good engineering for the region to evaluate all these potential solutions for their economic impact, for their social impact, and for their environmental impact. Those are the three legs on the stool of sustainability. So this is a standard water planning process. We've never done that here. We have no idea what the best way to proceed is. Well, we do have some idea. Some of the suggestions are to import water. There's a lot of problems with that. That should be studied. The stormwater import, the stormwater recovery for recharge is an excellent idea. It really deserves a detailed engineering study. I'm going to leave it to Mark to talk more about that. I want to talk more about conservation, though. Conservation is not going to solve the whole problem. None of these are a silver bullet. We're going to need a selection of solutions that we agree on, that we move forward with as a community. If we don't manage our water as a community, it will disappear. That's called the tragedy of the commons. So, back to conservation. Conservation is the fastest and cheapest way to conserve water. It's not going to solve the whole problem, but it's an important component. So Prescott has a pretty decent water conservation program where they require new construction to use drought-tolerant water conserving plants, native plants in the front yards and in landscape common areas of subdivisions. So that's a step forward. They could do a lot better. Landscape water use accounts for over a third of the water that's used in Prescott and Prescott Valley. That's water that's applied outside on plants. Like turf is a horrible idea that uses a lot of water. When you apply groundwater outside on plants, it just evaporates. So it's not recovered for treatment and recharge. It's just a net loss of groundwater. 1/3 of our water is applied outdoor and it just evaporates. We could do a lot better in that. Prescott's website has a lot of information on native drought-tolerant plants and landscaping. They have incentives for rainwater harvesting. That's always a good strategy. Prescott Valley has basically no policies on this. They are in the process of developing them now. They're a little late to the game, but they're doing it, so they deserve credit for heading in the right direction. Chino Valley is mostly on domestic wells. It's very difficult to do water conservation incentive programs on domestic wells. So landscape water control is super important. And the cities, the large municipal providers, Prescott Valley and Prescott, are either have water conservation programs or they're moving to developing them, so that's a good sign. Where there is no water conservation is in the county, because the county does not have statutory authority to regulate water. There's a lot they can do, though, through building codes and stuff. The counties can do a lot more than they're doing. One thing I want to suggest that's in keeping with the current effort to redo the county's zoning codes is that they need a conservation zoning overlay. So we could pick an area where water resources are stressed, and we could say, in this area, you have to do extraordinary things to save water, like gray water, like not using groundwater outdoors. So that would be a zoning tool that could be applied in a very targeted way, and the county could do that. They have the statutory authority to do it. Finally, one of my favorite solutions is just, well, if we could, we're not going to stop growth. That's just not politically possible, and so that's going to happen. What if we could grow without using more water? Let's think out of the box a little bit here. What if there was a way that we could have a new subdivision that would have zero impact on groundwater? Is that possible? Yeah, it is. Nobody's thinking about it. Nobody's trying it. What you have to do is, first of all, no groundwater gets used outdoors. Second, you have to be on a sewer system, no septic tanks. And so the wastewater has to be purified for recharge to benefit the aquifer, not recharge to gather groundwater credits that can be used to support yet more housing. That's a problem with state water law. Third, we have to collect stormwater runoff from the hardscapes in that subdivision, that is the streets, the driveways, the roofs, and move that to recharge. Right now, all that stormwater has to be, by current law, collected and put in a retention basin where it usually evaporates. We need to make sure that that water goes back into the aquifer. It's possible to do this, and somebody needs to try it. I actually talked with a major developer in Prescott Valley that agreed to do a demonstration project for 100 homes in the first phase one of their subdivision. And so we'll see how that works out. They did that because water conservation is marketable. I think there's a consumer base out there that people don't want to harm the environment. They want to do the right thing. We just need to provide the means for them to do that. So I think water conservation has huge undeveloped potential. It's not the whole answer. We need we need a regional management district that can manage these things. The first thing they should do is get grants to do a comprehensive engineering study. We should take the results of that study and apply them in infrastructure projects and policies to fix this problem. We can do this. We just have to want to do it.
Very good. Thank you, Gary. And Mark, solutions we should all be implementing now.
That's a great question. Thank you. So one thing that the state of Arizona notoriously does well is wait till the problem is so bad that it has to finally do something. The 1980 Groundwater Management Act was basically done to avoid a lawsuit so that the federal government would build the Central Arizona Project, okay? So still a great Groundwater Management Act, still a great law, but what have we done since 1980? Very little. One thing that the state of Arizona doesn't have is a statewide master plan for managing water. What are the priorities of the state of Arizona regarding water? Nobody knows. Because guess what? There's rural Arizona and there's urban Arizona. And where is all the money going? It's going to urban Arizona, where the majority of the population lives. So that's why I threw that slide up there showing the GDP of Yavapai County, because we're not, chicken scratch. We have the capabilities of, I think, managing our own water. If the state's not going to help, if we're not going to get financial assistance, we're going to have to look to ourselves. To Gary's point, we're going to have a state master plan that looks at what are the priorities and look at rural and urban Arizona. You want to live in urban Arizona? Great. But they have their own challenges right now. They've got a lot of things going on. And some of them are actually bleeding over into rural. And one thing I'll mention right now is, I will say contact your not only your state representatives, but your federal representatives and tell them that this Arizona needs support regarding a couple things. That our state representatives, we need a master plan that protects water for rural Arizona. Because right now, I've been on a rural water work group for 5 years since Governor Ducey. And right now there is a New York investment company that's eyeing up McMullen Valley, which is west of Phoenix. They bought 37,000 acres and they are going to import a lot of water for $1 billion plus into the Phoenix metropolitan area and maybe even further to Pinal and down to Pima counties using the Central Arizona Project. So as our water gets more scarce, what does it do? It creates a demand. And if we're not solving these problems ourselves, somebody else will, and they'll make a lot of money on it. And we want to be in charge of managing these. And I'll give you an example. A long time ago, there was, APS was contemplating building a nuclear power generating station in the desert. And people thought they were nuts. There was various investments. They needed the water. And so 5 communities down in the valley came together and they built a interceptor pipe, 96 inches. So it's a huge pipe that runs from the East Valley all the way over to 91st Avenue in the West Valley. 5 communities pipe some of their wastewater in this interceptor, which goes to 91st Avenue. And the reason I'm telling you about this is it's called the Sub-Regional Operation Group. They treat that water there, and because it's such a large volume, they enjoy the economy of scale. That's something we're not doing here in our region. Economy of scale is if we all came together, shared in the capital expenses to solve these water issues, at the end of the day, it costs less to everybody. So this 91st Avenue water reclamation facility that 5 communities send their wastewater to is treating 1 acre foot for half price of what the rest of the communities treat their wastewater independently. So these are something that we all talk about as I get into the economy of how you manage water, the water rates. I'll let economists talk about economies of scale. The more inputs you have, the greater the population, the greater the area, you're going to get economies of scale. You're going to get savings. And for us not to work together is a travesty. Why aren't we? And for so long, we've done more fighting than working together. So the paradigm, we're at a crossroads, we have to start working together. And I use that example because that water treated at 91st Avenue goes then, 80,000 acre feet, goes out to Palo Verde Nuclear Generating Station, which is the largest nuclear generating plant in the United States in a desert environment. And they're guaranteed that water because wastewater will always be generated. Similarly, to Gary's point, we have new folks moving here. They're coming from areas of the United States that have a lot of water. They're used to using a lot of water. If they came from the Midwest or the East Coast, wherever, they're used to having lawns. They're used to having very lush potential landscape material. They have to be educated. That doesn't occur here. We're trying to use drought-tolerant, native, low water use, and or water falls from the sky is actually enough to feed our outdoor landscapes. And they're beautiful. Desert landscapes are very beautiful. We want to embrace that. And we want to, have the highest efficiency. We want to have the best efficiency in plumbing or fixtures and all of those things. And the cities, again, do a great job at that. But the stormwater aspect I brought up earlier is something that the only water supply delivered to our region free of charge is rainwater. Some of that is actually channeled into a waterway is not owned anymore by water that flows over lands. Once it reaches a stream or a wash or a recognized water channel, it now belongs to somebody else. But before it gets there, it's owned by the landowner. It's called overland flow, or some call it sheet flow. And right now, as I mentioned earlier, we're managing that water as a nuisance. Imagine if every development in our region had plumbing coming from rooftops, streets. Instead of going to, as our supervisor mentioned, it goes into a big retention area and it sits there for 48 hours and is gone. Imagine that going into a piping structure that was then sent somewhere, treated and recharging the aquifer for us. That's the kind of projects we're going to have to get into. And I'm going to disagree with the county supervisor is, I agree that we want to have development look at recharge, but I ask these questions to every developer who is involved in pilot studies like the one in Prescott Valley. That development is geographically located in an area that is not preferential for recharge. So why recharge there when it does nobody any good? We need to recharge where we're pumping the water from, where the aquifer is most impacted. That's why we should collect stormwater and transport it, which is very expensive, and transport that water, treat it. And the other thing I'm gonna mention too, on the topic is treating that water. There are contaminants in stormwater. If we just put that water back in the ground, there's PFAS in it. Now PFAS is regulated by the federal government, EPA. That's a carcinogen. There's other things such as heavy metals and VOCs and other things from the roadways, our rooftops and so forth. So without understanding water quality equally with water quantity, we're doing ourselves another injustice. And we can't have municipalities rushing out and saying, oh, we're gonna do a pilot, we're gonna recharge water here, it's great, look at this, look at this. That's not how you do this. You sit back, you plan and understand what are the risks, what are the opportunities, what's the threats, you know, and you evaluate each one of these projects and make sure that you've evaluated what those components are. So when you take those big financial steps forward, and this step in Prescott Valley is they're looking at a small pilot, it's over $1 million. Will it actually recharge? They don't know. Is it gonna be water treated? No. I asked the question, are you treating this water? They said no. So I'm all for pilot studies, but we have to understand what we're doing so we don't hurt ourselves. Similarly, a lot of communities were developed in this region in the 1960s, the 1970s, and they have high density subdivisions, 6 and 7 septic tanks per acre. That water volume will get to the aquifer and it will cause water quality violations. So that's something Chino Valley has dealt with when it's annexed some of these old developments from the 70s. They have contaminated the aquifer. There was violations, whether nitrates and now even PFAS. We're seeing these smear zones from these septic systems. Everybody is discharging PFAS, which is in everybody's waste streams from your home use products. So we have to be careful. We have to understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. And when these projects are coming forward, we want to make sure that it's for the right reasons. We understand the risks, and we can understand that we're going to make sure that the health of the environment, our social well-being, health, and our economy is all supported by these projects. But stormwater is the only thing that we have that we're going to have to move forward with. The state's not going to help us. We're going to have to help ourselves. And unfortunately, our legislative body, which does not want to move forward with good legislation for until these legislators die or they finally get ousted. That's the other thing too, is make sure that when you are electing our state representatives, do they understand the water for your region? Are they truly your constituent? Because that's who you want at the state who supports what we're trying to do here. And that, again, we're going to probably be on our own to solve our own problems. That's it.
Thank you, Mark. And lastly, Chris, solutions we should all be implementing now.
And I think we need to be looking forward. You know, one thing he said is like, maybe recharge isn't good here because it won't recharge, it needs to go somewhere else. So can we look forward that way? And when I was on Prescott City Council, I don't know if you guys remember when they redid Willow Creek Road and they were putting the utilities in different places. I said, is there any purple pipe in the ground? And they go, no. I go, why aren't we putting purple pipe in the ground? We got a brand new wastewater treatment plant at the airport, and that might be neat. And purple pipe is what they use to transport effluent water. It's cheap, it's just plastic pipe. Put it in the ground while we got the trench open, and let's get it in there. So when there is a need, that pipe is already in the ground. We can transport that water to wherever it needs to go. So now there is purple pipe in the ground on that area. And I think the big thing that we can do, I look for the low-hanging fruit, like education is easy. And we've done something for a long time called Project WET, and it's funded by the county, and we take 4th graders every year, and they go out to Pioneer Park, and then we do it on the Verde side as well, and we just educate these 4th graders on conservation, the water cycle, watersheds, and what we found is they go home and they teach their parents. We get the feedback of that all the time. And it's been going on for so long, some of the fourth graders that were in it are now teaching it. So that's something that we can do. And when they're talking about putting this coalition together, there's been something that's just been recently started by myself and the supervisor out of Sedona, Nikki Check. We started the Water and Open Space Committee. And for too long, we've had two populations of one county separated by a giant mountain, and we don't talk with each other. But when you talk about the Verde River, it starts in my district and goes right through their district. Why are we not talking with each other? So we started this committee, and we've gathered up the mayors from the Verde Valley, the mayors and staff from the Prescott side, and we are talking about things, but the problem is we talk too much and then don't do anything. And one of the goals that myself and Nikki have is we're saying, you know what, we're gonna get specific topics, we're gonna send people away with homework, and they're gonna come back and report. And this is professionally facilitated. So we've hired this people called Southwest Decision Resources. They're out of Flagstaff. They come in, they kind of run the meeting, they keep you on focus, and everybody's showing up. We've had 2 meetings, and I was so happy that everyone showed up for meeting number 2. And we talked about stormwater runoff. What is your community doing? And that's where, you know, Kel out of Prescott Valley started talking about the recharge sticks that are in the ground. We started talking about what we're doing with managing the sheet flow and trying to slow that down. And everybody focused on one thing. And I think on our next meeting, we're gonna talk about different policies we can put in place. So a lot of things I talked about earlier, can we share different ideas and start getting this going? Because the big thing is we see a lot of these things start and then they slowly fall apart over time and people stop showing up to the meetings. It's a long drive to come here from Clarkdale. It's a long drive for us to go to Clarkdale for a meeting. But you know what? We're getting together, we're talking, and the feedback from the second meeting was so positive that people think they are getting something from this because we are focusing on one thing. And does it look at the giant picture? Not really. We're focusing on specific issues that we can address now. And you know, when we talk about you know, if I have to get elected again if I want to continue these ideas going forward. So when we talk about, are we going to throw on, who's for us doing big things on water? Just show of hands. Okay, who's for additional property tax to do big things with water? Okay, there's a couple, but you know what? I did that with roads as well. I said, who thinks the roads are bad and they need fixed? And everyone put their hand up. I go, who thinks the gas tax needs to go up? And every hand went down. So, you know, we have to decide as a population what we want to support our political people to do. And we have to be loud about what we're going to do. So anyways, I'm trying to work hard for you guys, talking with these guys, doing the Water and Open Space Committee, trying to address these problems. And we're really also working on getting a designation of wild and scenic for the Upper Verde River. So that'll be protected in the future. And I'm also working on that with Supervisor Check. But to get that designation, you need to get a congressional designation, and then you set up the rules for it. And it's scaring the hell out of the cattlemen and the Farm Bureau, and they won't support it, and they're a huge lobby. And I brought up this idea. I go, you know what? It would scare me too. I don't trust the government, and I is the government, right? So can we set up the rules first, get the designation, and then implement the rules? And maybe there'll be a level of comfort where these groups will support what we're doing. So we're trying.
Thank you, Chris. And now we have a little bit of time here for some questions. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, sir. Let me.
Okay, so the question was Talking Rock, Inscription, and Whispering Canyon. I understand they have their municipal wells right there at Talking Rock. These guys could probably say better on that. But when I was a garbage man, I was a respectable garbage man before I was a politician. When I was picking up in the west side of Chino, people said when that golf course went in is when they started having problems with their wells on the west side of Chino. And what was the other question? No, they collect the wastewater and then use it to water their golf course. So, but from what I understand is only 20% of the needs of the water for the golf course comes from the recharge. So that means 80% of that is groundwater. And but they're all in the same system. They're all in the same water system. So on the golf course, correct.
So that's correct. Those subdivisions, developments get their water from the Big Chino Aquifer, you know, and so they're pulling groundwater that is destined to flow down out the Verde River. When the Board of Supervisors approved that golf course, which must have been 20 or more years ago, it's when Tom Thurman was on the board. It was sold to them that the wastewater, treated wastewater collected from the homes would water the golf course. And that's not the case. He's saying 20% does. So that golf course is using a lot of groundwater for a private golf course, for a private development. So CWAG is opposed to any new golf courses in the area. The existing golf courses could use less water, and City of Prescott has studied that. There's more progress to be made there. You know, we got to live here, and people like to play golf, so there's no point in advocating drying them up, but they do use a lot of water. When they're the courses in Prescott, that is Hacienda and Antelope Hills, are irrigated with treated wastewater. So that's better than using groundwater, but not much. Treated wastewater is very valuable. It's almost as valuable as sweet, fresh groundwater.
And, you know, I think it's getting real out there. You know, there used to be this thing where, people saying we have tons of water, people saying there's not enough water. I'm on the Granite Mountain Water Company. 2.5 years ago, we went dry for a day and a half, and they started supplementing with water trucks in the tank because the wells on the water system wouldn't keep up. This is becoming real. And then we have a guy on our system using 40,000 gallons a month, and he won't stop. So we have to start making these changes, and the time is now.
Just
Next
to add that
question.
Chino Valley's water hauling has 2 water hauling stations, and half of Chino Valley's entire customer base is water hauling customers. That comes from east, which is the Coyote Springs area, and then the west, the Reed Road area on the west side of Chino Valley.
I actually have 2 questions. My first question, I was at a Firewise event last week, and my question is about the vegetation. Is there crossover between plants and vegetation that are Firewise and also good for the water situation, I guess is my main question. So when you're talking about new construction, can we encourage folks to use certain plants that are both good Firewise and also drought resistant, I guess, is a question.
Well,
you may or may not know the answer to that, so.
My impression of Firewise is that that relates more to the proximity and density of vegetation near structures.
Well,
The
they
water
also have
use-
a list of, they have a list of preferred
Right.
plants.
ADWR has a list of drought-tolerant, low-water use plants. That list is what Prescott Development Code requires for some parts of landscaping and new construction.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. And my second question is, the map that you had up there that showed all the wells that have gone dry or are in danger of going dry, how is that reported? Are folks reporting that to you? Is it being reported to the county that, hey, my well just went dry? Or how is that information collected?
Well, ADWR maintains a database of dry wells, and it's like 1% of the truth in it. They don't collect that. I was in charge of developing that map, and so we identified those properties from aerial photography as having these large water storage tanks. You can see those things from space. It's pretty crazy. And then we got the parcel number and the address, and we got the well registration number and all the well records for those. So I have this massive spreadsheet of 500 properties that have failing wells. We sent letters to those people asking them to tell us their story. We got one response. Basically, this is, I think, the reason for that is that it's kind of like asking somebody to tell you about their latest root canal. I mean, this is just not something they want to talk about. Having a failing well on a property does affect the property value. At one point, I talked with 4 realtors in the Chino Valley area, and the consensus was like a 40% cut in property value due to losing the asset value of the well and due to having the inconvenience factor of having to haul water. Those properties are not worthless. They have value, but they're going to have a lower value. Many times, that's the property owner's sole asset. People out there in West Chino especially, I mean, on Williamson Valley, that's kind of a middle-class area. Same thing in Coyote Springs, but in West Chino Valley, it's a low-income area. Those people out there are on Access Health Care and Social Security, and there's a lot of mobile homes that are older. When their well goes dry, they've just lost 40% of the only asset they have in their lives, and they've increased their monthly expenses by $200 when they're living on Social Security. What do you think that does? That's a big hit. So I was really impacted. I went out and talked to those people. So that was really interesting.
Just to add on reporting, so the state of Arizona owns water resources in the ground. They give you access. So if you're a landowner, they grant you access to that water supply. If it's an exempt well, it's exempt from most things, which is once you prove to the state that you drilled the well and you put a pump in there that meets the requirements of 35 gallons per minute or less, and newer wells may have a little bit different, but that you've met that requirement, whether that well works or is dry or anything is really states they're out of it. There's no reporting requirements.
And you know, we used to have a different mindset when it came to development too. And all you got to do is look out our window. Yavapai Hills, all those trees know how to live on what falls from the sky. They don't need irrigation out there. I mean, you can look at it, but now when you see every living thing ripped from the ground and they have to replace it with things that need irrigation, that's not thinking right in the situation we're in.
They call them parjuli pipes or plastic small tubes that promote water to get down and not be evaporated or something, right?
It gets down low enough so that it can actually get.
Some are as deep as 60 feet.
Okay, so if we're talking about that, that's going to contaminate the water thing, to have sheet water then going into a thing and then going straight in without any kind of water treatment, is that going to be okay to do that?
It won't be okay if it leads to a violation by the state Department of Environmental Quality, which says, hey, you've got PFAS now in this part of your aquifer. So PFAS is everywhere now. There's 9,000 plus PFAS constituents. It's now being regulated, you know, several of them are. But water quality needs to be managed as equally as water quantity. And if you're looking at just putting as much water in the ground as quickly as possible without considering water quality, you're going to end up with, you know, unintended consequences, to your point.
So I will point out that this is an experiment they're doing, so it's very small scale and it's not going to, won't do any harm. On a larger scale, this is a really important point about water quality, and this just goes to prove my point that we need a comprehensive engineering analysis of all these solutions in order to determine which way we should go.
Well, the ditch from a 100-acre watershed, Table Mountain was through my property. And I'm sitting here looking at all that water just keeps on going and goes out and just evaporates into another property. And if there was a way to take that water, and it's coming off the side of the mountain, so it isn't a problem where I don't think it's going to have the contaminants necessarily. How do you get in line for one of those experiments to?
Well, first of all, that sheet flow is accumulated in natural channels that would be called ephemeral streams. About half of the, excuse me, about half of the total recharge in the Prescott AMA is through ephemeral stream beds. So when you see it run off into a little wash or something, that is more than likely one of the better recharge spots in the area. So it's not necessarily wasted. The stormwater recharge project needs to focus on collecting more of that water, purifying it, and doing the most effective recharge possible. Recharge is actually touchy and difficult.
Very good. Next question.
I noticed your data was pretty old. Who's in charge of collecting that information?
You mean the data on the graph with the orange
Yeah.
bars? ADWR. I mean, Citizens Water Advocacy Group is a science-based organization. We rely on official data from ADWR. ADWR has not updated their online database since 2019. I wrote them a letter about that, asking them for the recent data. They said, we haven't done it, we haven't processed it. So ADWR is in charge of it. They're not doing a good job. In fairness to ADWR, they do have extraordinarily new responsibilities. The Colorado River contributions to the Central Arizona Project is on the verge of collapsing. That is the water supply, a significant part of the water supply for central and southern Arizona, 80% of the population of the state. So yeah, they ought to be worried about that. The state legislature hasn't increased their funding for a while. And there's 3 new active management areas that they're having to manage, Douglas, Wilcox, and Rengaris Plain. So they've just had a bunch of work dumped on them, and us little guys up here in northern Arizona, we tend to be forgotten anyway. All these other factors mean that we're very much on the back burner. I can't even get a phone call answered from the hydrology division at ADWR. So yeah, it's their fault. Ultimately, that's the legislature's fault because they won't fund adequate management of this essential resource.
But I'll just add, if we had an organization that was collecting our own data and we're paying for that and we're using that information for the benefit of our region, then it's a different story. And that's where we need to, I think, Gary's alluding to that we should be collecting our own data, we should be developing our own plans and strategies and priorities, and utilizing that data for all the benefits that we could use it for. So we really need to start collecting that data. If we're gonna get the data updated, we need to start doing that.
Have you ever heard of the state of Maricopa? There you go, that's where we're at.
Very good. Okay.
I did have a question, and this might be a silly question, but them draining these lakes around here, I just read another one for the Motor Weaver to take that down low. Is that really going down into, they said they had to maintain, you know, the lakes, but isn't that going down to the groundwater to, is someone cycling it off?
Somewhat. Prescott sits in a hard rock basin, so there's not that much recharge of the larger aquifer. The reason that Willow Lake is down is just due to regional drought. It's 17 feet below the outlet pipes on the dam, so it's a dead pool. The city of Prescott is taking this opportunity of low water levels to do a lot of vegetation management around the lake. It's an excellent effort. They have community involvement in that, and a nice website describing what they're doing. So Willow Lake is being cared for at a point where it's naturally low. We hope that the drought breaks. We're in the biggest drought since 1200 AD right now. And we're 20-something years into it. And it could go on another 20, we don't know.
Let me just add a historical note. I get this question a lot, like people come and say, oh my gosh, have you seen the bath lines on Watson and Willow Lakes? What are we doing about that? Well, they were part of Chino Valley Irrigation District. If you a little bit of history, those lakes were completely drained by summer for the irrigation district. They would let out that water, it would flow down the wash to Chino Valley Irrigation District, and flood irrigate fields. So they were fields every summer. And not until 1999, when the city of Prescott bought the lakes from the Chino Valley Irrigation District, and were allowed to do that and get the water rights for that as part of when the city of Prescott sold it had a Central Arizona Project water allocation. It sold to Scottsdale. And in lieu, they used some of that money then to buy the lakes for recreation. So they maintain the lakes strictly for recreational purposes. So, but we don't get rain, the lakes will have evaporation occurring. But they were dry every summer, basically, historically.
But they were also purchased for recharge credits of water coming off that dam.
Yes, they do apply some of the surface water recharge. A small amount goes for recharge when they have the water. But I did get a call from recently, when the water level gets to a certain point, they want to start releasing it in preparation for any type of predicted storm events. I think there was some storm events about a month ago or something. They were trying to prepare for flood. They look at flood mitigation. If you remember, it was a couple years ago in March, we had a massive flood event. The dam was overtopped. That water made it all the way to Chino Valley and blew out Perkinsville Road, and the people out at Coyote Springs were stranded. They couldn't get to the west. They were trying to cross that water crossing, and the town of Chino Valley had to call the Arizona Rangers to protect human life. So they try and better manage that more from flood, but there is a recharge. It is a water supply. There is some tribal, the Yavapai Prescott Nation has some water rights in there as well.
Yeah, so I had a question, kind of along the same lines of the lakes. Is, a while back we drained Lynx Lake, right? We let that down, so I think repair the dam or something to that effect. Were we smart about it? Where'd that water go? Were we smart to capture that water? And the same way with, like you're talking about Watson Lake, they're going to drain it down a little bit. Are we smart about capturing that water when we do that?
So I don't know the answer to that, but your question and a number of these other questions are kind of typical of what people's concerns are. You see surface water, you see streams, you see lakes, and so that comes from precipitation. Our problem is groundwater. You don't see that. That's the issue we need to focus on. This is a difficult informational problem, It's abstract, it's out of sight, and it is the problem. If the lakes went dry, we'd still have water coming out of our faucets as long as the groundwater lasts, and that is threatened in the future.
The groundwater took millions of years to fill these basins as they were forming, and it's a very small amount every year that actually makes its way to the groundwater system. So what took millions of years to fill, we're depleting amazingly every year. 20,000 plus acre feet every year we're mining from the groundwater system. And I use that term, there's a date in the future when it's going to cause irreparable harm. There'll come a point when the Little Chino will start having subsidence and land fissuring, which will destroy property values in those areas. And once the aquifer is compressed, where the water's been depleted, you can no longer put the volume of water back in that was originally there. So I look at those as significant consequences.
I guess my question is mainly about your process of determining that we're losing this groundwater and stuff. I mean, while I appreciate the effort of the drones flying over and seeing big tanks, there's a multitude of reasons why properties have water tanks on them. And it's not because their well is dry. It's because maybe they're on a shared well, and it eases the burden on the pumps to have a water storage tank. Or you chose not to have a well because you're a single person and you don't use 5,000 gallons a month, you only use a couple thousand. So you choose to do hauled. So I guess my question is how do we get accurate information about what the groundwater situation truly is, and how expensive is that, and so that we can be our own best advocates and have our own best solutions because we've got our own information.
I'll take the start on that if you want. So out in like the Coyote Springs and West Chino Valley. Okay, so There's a lot of wells out there that have been drilled, some from a while ago, and some more recently. Some newer wells, I've talked to some residents who tried to drill a well out there and got no water. They went down to bedrock. So as opposed to when a well was drilled in the 1980s and 1990s, 2000, there was water there. So that has a very sensitive part of the aquifer right there in that Coyote Springs. There's some geologic anomalies. Same with the southern part of Chino Valley. There's a deep wells. They call it deep wells for a reason. There's a geologic anomaly there. But here's the thing. Chino Valley and the county surrounding Chino Valley, it's the poster child of wells in the state of Arizona for exempt wells especially. So those wells give us a window to what's happening underground with the water table. And what we see with all of this, there's a plethora of data from these wells that has been collected both from private citizens who go out and measure depth to water and the state of Arizona when they were measuring. So we have a lot of historical data. Here's the thing I can tell you. On average, the water table in the Little Chino Subbasin is dropping 1.5 feet on average. Some areas it's closer to 3, some areas it's less than 1.5 feet. Some areas are very sensitive, some areas are not. But what that is telling you is that if you thought you had a water supply if you drilled a well and say you bought property today and you drilled a well and you had 50 feet of water column in there and that was all you could afford for a well, and the water table is dropping 1.5 feet every year, well, your well will go dry at some point in the future, in the near future. And you have choices then. Do you deepen the well or do you put in a tank? That's kind of what we're looking at. That, some of the wells though out there are at the bedrock, the basement of the aquifer. So there's no more water to be had. Same in Western Chino. That's a fringe area of the aquifer. It's more thin. They drilled their wells to the basement and there's no more aquifer. So you can't drill any more wells and get water. I hope that answered your question.
We do have really good data on the status of the water level in the aquifer. ADWR has 136 monitoring wells that are not pumped, that they measure every year, or some of them are actually on every 15-minute telemetry. So we know we have good data on the status of the water levels in the aquifer. As far as the yellow pins on the chart, the only way to do better than the aerial photography survey would be to go knock on every door, and just don't have the beans to do that, So I'm sure that there are some errors and there's some omissions in that chart. It's not perfect. It's a heck of a lot better than anything ADWR has.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
We're not getting help from the government, from the agencies.
Right. And notice I said that was failing wells. So that would be a well that's gone dry, like it's dry down to bedrock, as Mark is saying, or it could be a well that's not producing the volume required to provide basic services to the home. Either one of those cases generates a tank. And I have a lot more evidence on this too, if you want to talk more about it.
And during the campaign, I had an opponent that was saying, there's no problem with water in Williamson Valley.
That's
I
right.
could go stick my finger in the ground and make water come out. And I'm like, bring your finger to my neighborhood, And I drilled a 950-foot dry hole. And the other argument on the campaign trail was, well, you just need to drill your well deeper. Well, sometimes that doesn't work. As Mark was pointing out, sometimes there ain't no more water down there.
What'd that cost you, Chris?
Back then, $14,000, I could have went and just handed out 14 grand and had friends, but no, I gave it to the well driller.
It'd be twice that now.
Okay, I have a quick question about the health of the groundwater and that cavern where the water is held. You're saying that as that dries up, that will compress and that will lose that underwater area there. Can we import water? There's flooding all over the country sometimes. And I know that Jim Lehman, who was a candidate way back when, had mentioned this about importing some of this water. Now, I'm sure it's cost prohibitive, probably in some the way he might have been looking at it, but like we have the cap coming down from the Colorado River. So that's feeding the southern Arizona water supply. But when we're talking underground water and making this basin, this Chino Valley Basin, to be a little more healthy, it's going to need more water, it seems, to sustain it. So can we import some of this flooding water that's coming from the Midwest into our area?
Sure. ADWR did a focused work group and studied in conjunction with the Central Arizona Project to study water importation. So there's a couple of things they looked at. One was a desalination plant on the Sea of Cortez near Puerto Penasco that would produce 1 million acre-feet a year with a pipeline that would dump that water into Lake Pleasant, which is a storage basin for CAP water. That would cost about $2,200 per acre foot. It requires building multiple huge power plants in Mexico. And so right now, that would have the effect of basically tripling your water bills. So that's a possibility. Of course, nobody asked Mexico if that was all right. And so Mexico is gonna, want some of that water. So another solution was to bring water out of the Missouri River and give it to Denver, and then Denver would pump less water from the Colorado River. They have a tunnel underneath the Rocky Mountains from the Colorado River to Denver. So they would forego some of the Colorado River water and let that flow down to the CAP water. So that was even a little more expensive. Power plants, big pipelines, 5,000-foot lift. So these and then there was another scheme to import water from the Great Lakes. So yeah, we've thought about these schemes, and they're very expensive. And the idea of going to go get more water from someplace else is what Prescott in particular has done since the 1860s. Prescott started off dipping water out of Granite Creek, and then they had, at one point, they were pumping water from Del Rio Springs. They've had wells around the courthouse. There's a whole story here. Every time they've run out of water a half a dozen times, they fixed that problem by going someplace else to get it. We're running out of other places. We need to start working to live on what we have. We need to be more sustainably based and use the resources that we're given wisely. We're not doing that yet. So yeah, there's a lot of schemes for importing water, hugely expensive. Why don't we just work on working with what we got? First choice.
I'll just add, if it's okay. It's a great question. One thing we didn't mention really in depth is what we should be doing now. Well, all three municipalities in the North Little Chino Aquifer, Prescott, Chino, and Prescott Valley have purchased a water ranch up in the Big Chino. Now, where I'm heading with this is that the state of Arizona groundwater laws and the basin laws forbid what's called interbasin transfers. You can't, the state determined that because of Owens Valley, California, which basically LA dewatered a basin in Northern California to get water for LA and just basically dried up the basin. Arizona said, we're gonna learn from that. We're not gonna just open up the range and let anybody go out and drill wells in a basin and dewater it to bring water to their community. So there's only 4 basins in Arizona. You can legally do that. The Big Chino is the northernmost, and there are 3 basins west of Phoenix, Butler, McMullen, and Harquahala. And right now, there is a massive, massive state feud with the governor, the Department of Water Resources on McMullen Basin, because a New York-based investment company bought, I mentioned in my previous presentation, 37,000 acres of farmland. They want to pump the heck out of this basin and then put that water in the CAP canal and sell it for $1 billion. And I'm sure that there is mixed feelings because as the Colorado is drying up, Arizona communities and the 80% of the population are saying, we need the water. And if they don't get that water, the cost per acre foot for the CAP being half filled is like 4 times the cost. So it's a great question, but in Arizona, it's against the law for most basins, except for Big Chino for us. And that probably will be a solution, but to Gary, he's alluding is, it's gonna come at a cost. not only to transport the water, but how do you mitigate the impacts on the Upper Verde River? If we hold that river near and dear to our hearts, as I do, that river, I live like 4 miles from it and love that river and want to save that river. And it's a jewel, the crown jewel of Arizona, the last flowing river of the state. We need to preserve that. So how do you mitigate that? What are the costs associated with that? This is where planning comes into your point. We don't have the plans and the priorities and the wherewithal behind what, saying, yes, this is a plan we should go with. The voters have agreed to it. We're going to go move forward and do it. Until that day comes, we have these kind of conversations. And they're great conversations because the solutions are all dangling right there in front of us. And they're kind of like, yeah, we could do this, we could do that. But until we quantify the cost, the time, the impacts, environmentally, economically, and socially, to really understand that and have all those variables, it becomes the guessing game.
So, and I agree with what Mark's saying on this. The Big Chino pipeline is a big concern I have. If you want to learn more about it, I mean, this is a big topic, but I gave a presentation to CWAG last fall, and the video of that is on our website. So you could go to CWAGAZ.org, look in the video archive, and you'll see that presentation. Big, rich history. It's been a long, contentious discussion. CWAG's concern with the pipeline is that if the river flows about 10,000 acre-feet per year right now. It's diminished by climate change and high temperatures. So 10,000 acre-feet flows down the river. That water is groundwater from the Big Chino aquifer. If you take water out of the ground in the Big Chino and send it to another basin, that is basically taking water out of the river. It'll take a while for that to appear, and there's a lot of hydrologic details on this, but basically, the cities have agreed to mitigate any impacts on the river caused by their pumping, but they have no plan for how to do that. It might be possible to mitigate in the short run, but in the long run, it's not. If you have to replace the water into the river that you pumped out of the aquifer, why are you pumping out of the aquifer? Why don't you just do something else to get your water? Because it's just a scheme, a circular scheme that doesn't work. Big issue. I don't want to get started on it here.
And CWAG is a great meeting to go to. I think you're open to the public, right?
Absolutely.
And they meet over there at that little church behind, the old church behind the hardware store, and Leslie still lays out her library.
Yeah. So next meeting is this Saturday at 10 o'clock, and we have Matt Colleen from the city of Prescott and 2 other folks from Public Works, and they're coming to talk to us about Prescott Lakes. So if you have concern about Watson and Willow Lakes, this is the place to get the skinny on it.
This message has been brought to you by Gary Beverly.
10 a.m. Saturday at the Granite Peaks Unitarian Universalist Church, 882 Sunset, behind True Value in Prescott. Okay.
This is just more of a statement on whether the data was correct or not. I live in East Chino, and I'm on an exempt well. My subdivision was built in 1998, but I didn't build a house till 2017. When my well was drilled in 1998, the static level was at 117 feet. It's now at 287.
Wow.
So, and 260 when I built a house 10 years ago. So that's 1.5 feet a year or more, and that's verifiable. So it's just, and I want to thank you guys for doing this and encourage everybody to talk to your friends and neighbors because it's a real problem.
Yep.
And who are you?
Robert Switz from Chino Valley Town Council.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Coming, hold on.
Mark, you touched upon this. What about agriculture and industrial, I'll call it industrial agriculture? We've been talking about people, but how does agriculture play into this?
So historically, agriculture was a big part of the groundwater withdrawals. And before 1980, what was being pumped out of the region was these large agricultural wells. Chino Valley, for example, There was a garlic farm where now Old Home Manor resides. Some of those big irrigation wells were pumping, 5,000, 4,000 gallons a minute. That was really impacting the groundwater system. And again, when the Groundwater Management Act was created, and then eventually in 1999, when the Prescott AMA was found to be an overdraft, they had the incentive, the department in this process of, if you own agricultural land and you want to retire it, you could convert your irrigation grandfathered right, if you were pumping during a qualifying period when they created the AMA and found it in overdraft in 99, when they declared it an overdraft, you could actually retire that water right and then convert it into what's called, instead of irrigation right, it would be an extinguishment credits. And if you did that at the very beginning, you had a high multiplier. It was till the year 2025, so you had a 25-year multiplier if you did that conversion and retired agricultural lands in 2000. And some of those landowners did do that in Chino. I helped them. They wanted to convert and retire parts of their irrigated lands. They could sell those water rights, and they were valuable then. They were selling them for $25,000 per assured water supply credit. That's 1 acre foot delivered every year for 100 years. So some folks retired on that, and they retired their irrigation and their agriculture. There is still agricultural activity today. The Chino Valley Irrigation District, basically when they sold the lakes to Prescott, Prescott agreed that they would provide to the irrigation district reclaimed water through an exchange. City of Prescott recharges its reclaimed water, its recycled water from its reclamation facility. That can be recovered in Chino Valley for water then to be pumped out of a recovery well for irrigation uses. I think that agreement has kind of hit the end, where I think the irrigation district was probably on its final days or years, and it will eventually, those irrigation lands will go away. But you still have in Chino the Freeman Farm. It's a kind of a historic irrigated farming area as an experiment that's more of a tourist attraction, where people from Phoenix can come up to Chino Valley and see how an actual family farm is still run today. But I think in all the active management areas, the goal of the state was, we're in an arid desert state. Agriculture needs to be minimized, and therefore we need to incentivize, and that's how the laws and rules were created, to try and incentivize agriculture to convert to municipal and industrial, where you can collect then back a great portion of what's the water you bring to a customer can be collected, treated, and reused over and over and over again. And I'll just give you here's a little fact, and I have nothing against agriculture. 72% of the entire state's water supply is used for agriculture. However, in the state's $433 billion gross domestic product, you know what their GDP is? 0.5%, even though they're using 72%. So I look at that as opportunity, partnership. Let's invest billions of dollars and help agriculture build miles of greenhouses where they can recycle water and release some of that water for where it's needed. That's where I think an opportunity is. Food for thought.
So in the Prescott AMA, large-scale agriculture has greatly declined. Now agricultural water use is about 10% of what it was in the 1970s. Just a little stat to back up what Mark was saying. A lot of the existing agriculture is now small farmers that grow for the Prescott Farmers Market, and many of them are now in the Paulden area. So the ag water use has gone down. Municipal water use has gone up about the same amount that ag has gone down. Total water use in the AMA since the 1970s, is roughly the same. We're just supporting more people and less farms.
Very good. I think that takes care of it. I'd like to thank our panelists, Chris, Mark, and Gary, for a great job.
Thank you.
I'd like to say thank you to the Starting Point Church for this wonderful venue. It's been fantastic. And thank you to the Arizona Business Collective for hosting this event. Special recognition to Chris Damron. If you could stand up, Chris. and Lizzie McNett. I'd just like to thank him for all their hard work in setting this up and hosting the event. And stay tuned for the next Arizona Business Collective Series, continuing with a wellness seminar on July 8th. We'd like to give a shout out to the sponsors for this event: Starting Point Church, National Bank of Arizona, Pioneer Title Agency, Caring Causes, New Life Financial, and myself with Yavapai Broadcasting. As a side note, if you're looking for, if you need to have any MC work done, let me know. And thank you all for attending. Give yourself a hand. Thank you.